Well, my client had this shirt that he loves. This shirt. It's a nice silk. I wish you could feel it. It feels really nice. He couldn't wear it anymore because in time it had faded and he didn't want to wear it faded. So he asked me if I would make him a pocket square to go into his suit pocket of his jacket. So I suggested, why stop at a pocket square? Why not make a tie as well? I'm going to show you how to take this men's shirt and convert it into a tie and a pocket square. To start with, I went to a local thrift store and I found a ugly tie, or a tie that I wouldn't wear. I took the tie apart and I made, patterns from the actual piece of the tie itself. And then this is the wonderful part. This is the inner lining of the tie, and it's really firm, and that's what gives your ties their body. So I took this out so that I could use this as my pattern as well. The manufacturer had their tie turned in like this and turned in on this side as well, and then a liner piece was on. Well, I'm not going to use a liner piece. I'm going to let this whole thing be my liner. So what I did is I went and added an extra piece of fabric to the end, because what I want to do is I want to be able to fold this over and make it a self liner, so that the liner right here is the same as the fabric that I'm actually using here. So I did the same thing on the other piece of the tie, or the smaller end, or the tie end, the end that the guys always tie. As you notice, they're in two pieces. They were sewn together like this in a diagonal, so that way when you fold it over, you don't have all the seam right here in one bulk, but by slanting it, the seam is kind of spread out. So what I did is I removed that, because these have to be cut separately. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you take this tie apart, that stitching that they had there in the center, and the reason for that seam is because you have to cut this tie in two pieces. So you got to remember that when you're laying this out on your fabric, or in this case the shirt, you got to make sure that you lay the fabric crossways the fabric. So now let's and like I said, I've already taken the inner piece out. The center piece is all one. You know, even if sometimes these come in two pieces and they just butt up to each other, which is fine. To give me more fabric, I'm going to cut off the collar. So the collar is removed, and now what I'm going to do is find the shoulder. I'm going to cut the shoulder over to the sleeve. Alright, now that I've cut across the sleeve, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the sleeve out. And now you see I have one long piece of fabric. You're going to have the seam somewhere show up in the tie, but I'm just going to try to position it so that if they show up near the center of the tie, or the portion where he has to tie it. When you lay it out, always start with the larger piece of the tie, which will be the front of the tie, versus the piece that goes behind that you tie. So I'm going to lay it out. You want to make sure that since this is the bottom of the tie, this is a portion everybody will see, make sure that portion is of the good fabric. So if you have to, in my case, as you see, my seam is right here. Here's the side seam of the shirt. So I'm making sure that this upper portion of the tie, the side seam will cover that, so you won't see it. But down here at the bottom, that's where the nice portion of the tie is. I've laid out the larger portion of the tie, and before I pin it in place, I'm going to lay the other side, because I want to make sure I have enough space, which I do without a problem. And you're going to do the same thing for the side that's going to close over and be the under tie portion. You want to make sure that it's in the good portion of the fabric. As you see, the seam is right here. So the seam is getting put near the section of the tie where they join. So nobody will see this seam, and it should not interfere with tying. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my pieces in place. And now you're just going to cut them out. We've got it all cut out, and now we have our tie pieces. This is pretty much how they're going to go together, and it's going to look kind of funny with the way it's shaped. As you see, is going this way. So if you do it that way, it fits up nicely. But what you're going to do is you're going to fold it over so that you can sew right sides together. So I'm going to pin that in place, and then we're going to sew your seam allowance, whatever seam allowance you choose. I'm just going to do a 5/8 myself. Now that we've sewn it, this is what you get. You get that seam that runs right across. So what you're going to do is you're going to press that seam open. You're going to take your ends of your tie. You're going to fold this over so you end up with a triangle shape. And this time I'm going to sew just like 1/4 inch. I'm going to do the same thing with both ends of the tie. Okay, I've got that one sewn. So now let me find the other end. So what you're going to do is you're going to clip the edge or the corner of your point. You're just going to clip it so that when you put all that on the inside, it don't have that bulk. So now you're going to put your finger in, you're just going to turn it, and when you turn it, so you got the nice pretty side. And what you're going to do is you're just going to press it flat and put a little steam on it. And you see how nicely that presses. You have to insert the facing for the tie, and you're going to insert the tip in here so that the tip ends up right here. What you can do to make sure it ends up there, you can place it there at the tip and then hold it in place, and then turn the tie, and when you do that, it stays up in there. So you're going to pin the tie in place. Now that you've got the inner facing in, you're going to pin the inner facing to the tie. And when you get to the end, you notice that the end is a little short. That's fine. You're going to roll this over. What I like to do is I like to go ahead and press it. So roll this over and press it on one side. You're going to do that all the way down, just rolling that one side in and pressing. Okay, now you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now that you've got it all pressed over, what you're going to do this time, you'll take either side that you want, and you're going to take it and you're going to roll this over. So you can do this side if you want, and roll this over and pin it. And when you pin it through all thickness. And you're going to do this all the way down. Just pin, roll over, pin, and tuck. I've got the seam turned and pinned all the way down the tie. So now we're ready to do our hand stitching to finish up our project. Now what I'm going to do is I've already knotted my thread, so I'm just doing like a little whip stitch. So I'm just going to whip stitch right up until, and I'm doing small whip stitches so you barely can see them. Okay, now I'm at the point where the facing is. This time when I do the whip stitch, you want to grab the facing. Do not go through on the underside of the tie. So you're going to grab the facing as you whip stitch. And I'm just going to do a couple of whip stitches at a time. And you're grabbing. And the purpose for that is so that when you grab this, when the tie gets turned, it doesn't separate and the facing doesn't start moving. So you'll just keep doing this all the way down until you have finished hand stitching your tie seam together. Well, I finished stitching my seam down. You see I just did a little simple whip stitch all the way up and all the way down to the other side. And then I pressed the tie so you can see what our tie looks like. It turned out pretty nice, I thought. So now we're going to cut out the pocket square. And you see I've got a nice big piece of the fabric left. This is part of the back. So I'm going to measure to see just how wide it is. Like that's about 13 by about 11. So I want a pocket square that is 9 by 9. So what I'm doing is I'm folding this over in 4s. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 4.5 inches. I'm going to measure 4.5 inches, and I'm going to make my little mark right there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side over here so we can get it all squared. I'm going to do 4.5 inches on there as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across here, and I'm going to cut across here. And now you have a pocket square. You just grab it in the middle, and there he just sets it inside of his pocket. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a rolled edge stitch around here just to finish it off, or you can even serge it. Well, I've serged my pocket square. I just did a nice little narrow serge edge around it, so now it's ready to be pressed and ready to be inserted into the jacket. I have my husband's jacket here that I'm using as a sample, and here is the pocket square that we made. So you're going to find the right side, and you're just going to grab it in the middle, and then it kind of just goes into the pocket, and it kind of looks like that.